We need strong leadership from your office and from you in particular, to take action to minimize the losses that we're so concerned. So in particular, we're looking at this EPA Clean Power Plan. It calls for a reduction of carbon emissions by 38%, which is a lot, in the next 15 years. The governor's office, we hope, will develop a transparent process to develop and then implement the plan to reduce these carbon emissions.
Well, they weren't afraid to say the words climate change back then. Our next guest is one of 5 scientists who met with Florida Governor Rick Scott last August. He is a professor of marine science and chemistry at Eckerd College on Florida's Gulf Coast. It's a pleasure to welcome Dr. David Hastings to MidPoint. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Hastings.
It's a pleasure. It's glad to be here.
All right, so I could tell that was a little bit uncomfortable for the governor there to be in that situation. What is your opinion of this report that says Florida's Department of Environmental Protection was banned from using the terms climate change and global warming?
Yeah, I'm going to trust that the investigative journalism was done well. That's a reputable organization there, the folks that did it, and I think it's certainly unfortunate. I think that's the sense I get from it. We live in a democracy, and democratic institutions like our state government rely on transparency and openness, and this is the opposite of that. I think there's consensus that it's unacceptable, and it's really unfortunate that that's happened. It's good that it came out, because now we know that what the governor was trying to do was just to silence these concerns.
And what was your opinion of that meeting that you had with the governor when you talked to him about that? Was there any follow-up? Did you feel that he was receptive to what you had to say?
Right. So, I mean, needless to say, we were very glad to have the meeting. It's important to meet with elected officials, and it's quite an honor to meet with the governor of Florida. It's one of the largest state, 3rd or 4th largest state, and so we were very pleased to have the privilege to meet with him and to talk about the science of climate change here in Florida. And in fact, it was a very brief meeting. He didn't ask any substantive questions, and there was no reflection of the concern that we had for the science of climate change. And most importantly, it didn't appear that he understood that solutions are at hand, and they're business solutions. They're really remarkable.
Yeah, right. And I was going to ask you about that, because I did a little research. I know there's maybe not a direct tie between climate change and beach renourishment, but this state has spent over $500 million on beach renourishment. Have you been able to quantify any other costs that you would tie directly back, and I don't want to say global warming, but to that type of stuff?
Well, we can use whatever words we want. We're talking about the same thing. It's climate change, it's global warming, it's, and there are lots of impacts that are associated with it. It's not just increase in temperature, of course, but we'll get into that perhaps later on. There are a lot of impacts. I mean, if you look what's going on in Miami, they're having to re-engineer the drainage system. At the starting price for that is $450 million, and it's expected that the price tag for these modifications are going to be really quite significant, in the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars just in the state of Florida. So that's certainly motivation to turn around and start doing something about it besides just responding.
Now, is there anybody in the state of Florida government that has been more receptive to what you just talked about there, the real economic impact of what may or may not be happening?
Yeah, I'll back up a little bit. I'm a scientist, and that's my primary concern is science. I'm also concerned about the policy, but I'm most engaged with the science and the impacts. I do know that the local level, in my county and in my community, there are quite a few folks elected officials who are concerned. My mayor of St. Petersburg, Rick Kreisman, is very involved and engaged in this sort of stuff, and I think that's appropriate. And I look to that sort of leadership at the state level as well.
Yeah, and I think we have a quote here from an attorney for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and I'll read it here. I don't know if, there we go, we can get it up on the screen. This policy amounts to government censoring of science in a state where the best available science is critical to ensuring our economy can remain strong. Not only does such partisanship hurt us here at home, but it also discredits Florida's legitimacy in the global marketplace of ideas and scientific exchange. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yes, I do. We need to rely on the best available science. The science is getting better and better. When I started out in this field 25, 30 years ago, there was some uncertainty, there was some questioning, and I think at this point we're standing on solid ground. There are still interesting questions to answer, but in terms of policy decisions, we really need to move forward and take some action as opposed to, as scientists, we
and as you mentioned, and we'll have to cut it off there because we're out of time, but I appreciate billions of dollars potentially at stake here. Thanks a lot, Doctor. Great talking with you. After the break, a look at the business side of China and what it's doing to regulate food. Can we trust him? And a little birdie says it's an opening office in Hong Kong. I butchered that tease. We're talking about Twitter opening in Hong Kong. We'll be back with that.